You ever get a text from someone that's so casual, so completely unbothered, that it takes you a full minute to even process what you just read? Like your brain just refuses to load it? That's where this story starts. One text message, 11 words, and the next 3 months of my life turned into something I couldn't have written if I tried. I'm George, 30 years old. I work in logistics management for a mid-sized freight company. I own my house. I pay my bills on time. And I've always been the kind of guy who handles things. Not in a dramatic way. Just quietly. Something breaks. I fix it. Something goes wrong. I figure out the next step. That's always been my way. Marie was 28. We'd been together for 2 years when this happened. She was sharp. She was funny. She had this energy that made ordinary days feel like something was always about to happen. I liked that about her. I thought I liked that about her. Turns out there's a thin line between spontaneous and reckless, and I just hadn't seen it clearly yet. One thing you need to know going in, Marie didn't have a car. More specifically, Marie didn't have a license. She lost it about a year before we met. She told me about it on maybe our 4th date, kept it light, said it was a DUI thing, said it was handled, said she was working on getting it reinstated. I didn't push hard on the details because, honestly, people make mistakes. And she seemed like she had it together otherwise. That was my first miscalculation in a series of miscalculations. Because she didn't have a car, she used mine sometimes when I wasn't using it. My 2021 Ford F-250 paid off. I kept that truck in good shape, regular maintenance, always clean, no unnecessary miles. It was the nicest thing I owned, and I was deliberate about it. She borrowed it maybe a dozen times over the course of our relationship. Grocery runs, appointments, visiting her mom across town. Normal stuff. I never thought twice about it. Until a Tuesday in March. I was at work, just stepping out of a meeting around midday, when my phone buzzed. I looked down expecting a work email, or maybe a lunch order confirmation. It was Marie. The text said, and I'm going to write this exactly as she sent it. Hey, so I crashed into a parked car with your truck. Oh, don't worry, I just drove away, nobody saw. I stood in the hallway of my office building, and I read that 3 times. Not because it was hard to understand. The words were simple enough. I just kept waiting for the part where it made sense. Like maybe there was a follow-up coming that would reframe the whole thing. There wasn't. She had taken my truck, hit someone's parked car hard enough to cause damage, looked around, decided nobody was watching, and drove away, left the scene. And then she texted me about it like she borrowed my phone charger without asking. The LOL is what really did something to me. Not anger exactly, not right away. More like the feeling you get when you realize something you thought was solid is actually hollow. I stood there for another few seconds. Then I typed back, "Thanks for telling me." That's all. Nothing more. I kept it completely flat, because something had already clicked in my head, and I needed to think before I said another word to her. I went back to my desk. I sat down, and I thought through the situation the way I'd think through a logistics problem at work. What are the facts? What are the risks? What's the next step? Here were the facts. My truck was involved in a hit and run. The other car's owner was going to come back and find damage with no note. If there were any cameras in the area, or any witnesses who caught a partial plate, or anyone who saw anything at all, it came back to my plates. My registration. My name, George, 30 years old, whose truck just left the scene of an accident. And here's the thing about hit and run in most states. It doesn't matter who was driving. If the registered owner can't account for the vehicle, they're in a complicated spot. I was not going to sit on this and hope it went away. That's not how I'm built. I pulled up the non-emergency line for our local police department, and I called it. A dispatcher answered. I explained that I was a registered owner of a vehicle involved in a hit-and-run accident earlier that morning, that I had not been driving the vehicle at the time, and that I had a text message from the person who had been driving admitting to the accident and to leaving the scene. The dispatcher took my information and asked me to come into the station after work to give a formal statement. I said I'd be there. I did not call Marie. I did not text her back. My phone buzzed 2 more times over the next hour. You're not mad, right? And then a George. And I let them both sit. After work, I went to station. I had my phone with a full text thread. The officer I sat down with was a detective named Ramos, mid-40s, looked like he'd heard everything twice already. The kind of cop who doesn't react much because he's learned that reactions slow things down. He took my phone and scrolled through the thread. Read it once. Read it again. This is your girlfriend? He asked. She was, I said, and I realized as I said it that I meant it. He asked if she'd be available for questioning. I told him I had her number and her address, which was my address. She'd been living with me for about 8 months at that point, and that I couldn't speak to her availability, but I could give him everything he needed to reach her. He nodded, and then said something that changed the shape of the whole conversation. The vehicle that was hit, we already have a report on it, he said. Owner came back, saw the damage, filed a report about 2 hours ago. No witnesses at the scene, but there's a business camera across the street. We were already running the plate when your call came in, so it was already in motion. The investigation existed before I picked up the phone. I had just made sure I was standing on the right side of it. When everything caught up, I also told Ramos something I hadn't led with. I told him Marie's license was suspended. He looked up from his notepad. I said I didn't have documentation on the specifics, but that she told me it was related to a DUI, and that reinstatement was still pending. He wrote it down without saying much. I drove home that night, and the truck cab was very quiet. I hadn't decided exactly what I was going to say when I walked through the door, but I knew I wasn't going to come in swinging. I wanted to see how she played it first. She was on the couch when I got home. She had that look she got when she was nervous, a kind of wound-up energy like she'd been rehearsing. She started talking before I'd even set my keys down. Okay, look, I didn't want to leave a note because I didn't know whose car it was, and it seemed like a minor thing. I checked your truck, by the way. The truck is totally fine. The truck isn't the point, I said. The bumper barely. Marie. I said it once, not loud, and she stopped. I filed a report today with the police. I gave them your text as evidence. She went very still. You called the cops, she said slowly. On me. I called the cops to protect myself, I said. My truck, my plates, my name attached to a hit and run. I wasn't going to let that sit there with my name on it. George. And the scared energy shifted into something harder. Do you understand what you just did? I could get arrested over this. That's a consequence of leaving the scene of an accident, I said. I didn't put you in that position. She stared at me, then she walked into the bedroom and closed the door, and I heard her get on the phone. The next morning she called her mother. I know because she wasn't quiet about it, and our house isn't that big. Her mother, Linda, was a kind of woman who had spent the better part of 30 years making sure Marie never had to fully absorb the weight of her own decisions. I'd seen it operate in small ways. A bill Linda quietly covered, an awkward situation Linda talked someone out of pursuing. I was about to see it in a much larger way. Linda called me directly about an hour after that conversation. George, she said, in a tone that was polite the way a closed fist is polite, I think you need to think carefully about what you've set in motion here. Marie made a mistake. She knows that. But you going to police over something like this is an overreaction, and it's going to have real consequences for her. Someone's car got damaged and the driver left the scene. I said, that's not a private matter. That's a crime. It was a minor fender bender, Linda said. The owner of the other car filed a report. I said, there's camera footage. This was already being investigated before I called. I just made sure I wasn't the one who looked guilty. There was a pause. Then Linda said very evenly, if you push this, Marie will tell the police that you gave her permission to drive that truck, that you knew about the situation, and you're only now trying to cover yourself. I let that sit for a second. She can say that, I said, and then the police will ask me, and I'll say she's wrong. And then they'll pull her license status. And then we'll see how the whole picture looks. Linda hung up. I sat with that phone call for a while. The threat had been clear, and it had been deliberate. Linda wasn't slipping up. She was making a calculated move on her daughter's behalf. What it told me was that Marie had already decided she wasn't going to take responsibility if she could avoid it, and her mother was on board with whatever it took to make that happen. I called my own attorney that afternoon. Not a criminal attorney. Just a general practice guy I'd used before for some property stuff, named Alan. I walked him through the whole situation. He told me I'd done the right thing calling in when I did, that the text message was significant evidence, and that the threat Linda had made, that Marie would claim I gave permission, was something I should document. He had me write up a timeline while it was fresh, date and time everything, and sent him in an email so it was on record. He also confirmed what I'd suspected about the license situation. Driving on a suspended license in our state is a separate criminal charge from the hit and run. They stack. Marie wasn't just looking at one problem. About 4 days into all of this, I got a call I wasn't expecting. A man named Derek, who said he was Marie's ex-boyfriend from about 3 years back. He'd gotten my number through someone we both knew at the edge of our social circles. I don't want to get too into it, but it wasn't out of nowhere. He was calm on the phone in a way that told me he'd thought about the call for a while before making it. "I'm not trying to cause drama," he said. "I just want to give you some information. What you do with it is completely up to you." He told me that the DUI that had suspended Marie's license, it wasn't one incident. It was 2. The second one had involved a parking lot accident where she'd hit a car and driven away. Almost the exact same situation as what had just happened with my truck. That case had been pleaded down significantly, and Derek had contributed to her legal fees. "She does this," he said. "It's not a one-time thing. I'm not saying this to pile on her. I'm saying it because I remember standing exactly where you're probably standing right now, trying to figure out if you're overreacting." I thanked him and I meant it. I thought about that call for a long time after, because the thing that bothered me most wasn't that Marie had a history. People have histories. It was that she'd given me a version of that history that was carefully edited to remove the pattern. The DUI was singular. It was handled. It was in the past. That's what I'd been given. And I'd accepted it without asking the questions that would have given me the fuller picture. About a week after I'd reported the incident, my insurance company called me. My agent said there had been an inquiry on my account the previous day. Someone had called in, identified themselves as me, and tried to get information about the status of any claims related to the truck incident. They'd gotten one security question wrong, and the voice profile hadn't matched my recorded customer profile. So the call had been flagged and no information was released. But they were notifying me as a precaution. I drove to the insurance office the following day and sat down with my agent in person. We documented the unauthorized inquiry attempt formally. I got a copy of the documentation. Then I called Ramos and told him about it. "Adding it to the file," he said. He'd been saying that a lot. I also called Alan, my attorney, and he sent a formal letter to Marie's attorney. She retained one by this point, making clear that any further attempt to access my financial, insurance, or personal accounts without authorization would result in additional legal action. We didn't hear anything more on that front. Marie tried one more thing before she gave up on the approach of trying to make me fold. It was a Sunday night, maybe 10 days after everything had blown up, and she came and sat at the kitchen table and looked at me in a way that was different from the defensive, calculating way she'd been looking at me all week. Smaller. Somehow. "I'm genuinely scared," she said. "I already have stuff on my record. If this goes through the way you're letting it go, I could lose my job. They do background checks. George, I'm asking you. Please." And I'll be honest, that wasn't nothing. It sat in my chest for a minute, because I had cared about her. That doesn't just turn off. "I hear you," I said, "and I'm not enjoying this. But I need you to think about something. The person whose car you hit, do you know anything about them? Did you even look before you got back in the truck? Because they came back to a damaged car with no note and had to figure out what happened. And you texted me LOL. She didn't say anything. I didn't put you here. I said, the hit and run put you here. The suspended license put you here. The call to my insurance company put you here. I'm not dropping it." She moved out 5 days later. Took her things while I was at work. Left her key on the counter. About 2 weeks after that, Ramos called me. The camera footage had come back clearly. Crystal clear, actually. You could see my truck pulling out of a parking space, clipping the silver Honda Accord 2 spots over, the driver, Marie, getting out, walking around, looking directly at the damage on the Accord, then getting back in my truck and driving away. She had seen exactly what she did. She'd stood there and looked at it, and she left anyway. The Accord belonged to a woman named Patricia, 63 years old. She worked part-time at a dry cleaner 2 blocks from the parking lot. The repair estimate on her car came in at around $2,400. Her deductible was $1,000. She'd already paid out of pocket because she needed her car for work and didn't know how long the process would take. That's the number that made everything feel real in a different way. $1,000 out of pocket. For Patricia, because Marie had somewhere to be, the case moved through the system the way these things do, slowly, with a lot of paperwork in between. Marie was charged with misdemeanor hit and run and with operating a vehicle on a suspended license. Her attorney was good, and he worked the case. But the text message was direct admission. The camera footage was direct visual evidence. The license situation was documented. There wasn't much to work with. She pleaded guilty to the hit and run charge. The plea included a fine mandatory restitution to Patricia for her full out-of-pocket amount, a probationary period, and a further extension of her license suspension. The unlicensed operation charge was incorporated into the plea agreement. But here's the part one want to make sure doesn't get buried in the legal details. Patricia didn't have an attorney. She didn't have someone walking her through the process or keeping her updated. She'd filed a report, paid her deductible, and was just sitting on the outside of a process she couldn't see into, waiting. I found her contact information through my access to the incident report as the registered vehicle owner. I drove to the dry cleaner on a Wednesday afternoon. She was behind the counter, small woman, measured in the way people get when they've been handling things alone for a long time. I told her who I was. I told her what had happened, where the case stood, that a plea had been entered, and that a restitution order was part of it, meaning she'd receive a payment to the court covering her $1,000 deductible. I gave her the name of the DA's office contact handling the case and told her she could call them if she had questions about timing. She looked at me for a moment after I finished. "You didn't have to come here," she said. "I know," I said, "but you got caught up in this through no fault of yours. Seemed like you deserved to at least know where things stood." That was the whole conversation. I didn't stay long, but driving home from that dry cleaner was the first time since all of this started that I felt like something had actually settled. Before the court restitution payment went out to Patricia, I sent her an anonymous payment through a third-party service that covered her full $1,000 deductible. I didn't tell her it was from me. By the time the court check arrived, she was already whole. I'm not sharing that for credit. I'm sharing it because Marie's text said don't worry. As in, don't worry about the car. Don't worry about the person whose car it was. Don't worry about any of it. And I just couldn't operate that way. I couldn't look at this whole situation and decide that Patricia's $1,000 was just a collateral detail. There were two things that happened after the plea that are worth mentioning. First, about 6 weeks after everything was resolved, Marie texted me one more time. All it said was, "I hope you're happy." I thought about that for a while, whether I was happy. The honest answer is not in the way she meant it. I didn't feel good watching someone I genuinely cared about walk into a plea deal and a probation schedule. But I also hadn't put her there. I had just refused to stand in front of the freight train. She was already driving, setting that weight down, the weight of someone else's choices. That's not happiness, but it's something close to peace. I didn't respond. Second, Derek reached out again a few weeks after the case closed, just to check in. We've had a couple of conversations since. He's decent. It's a strange thing. The people situation pulls into your orbit. He said something on one of those calls that stuck with me. He said, the worst part isn't that she did it. It's that she genuinely didn't think it was a big deal. And that's it, exactly. That's the thing that's hard to shake. My truck is fine. I took it through a full detail, went over mechanically, made sure everything was right. It's sitting in my driveway right now. Same as always. The relationship is gone. I don't carry bitterness about it because bitterness is heavy, and I'm not interested in hauling around. But I don't have any softened version of who Marie is either. Not anymore. What I keep coming back to is how automatic it all was. Hit the car, check that no one's watching, leave. Text the boyfriend to LOL. And then when consequences showed up, go immediately to lying, threatening, manipulating, and attempting unauthorized access to accounts. Not a single moment of, let me fix this. Not one. That's not a mistake. A mistake is hitting the car. Everything after that was a choice. And the LOL, I keep coming back to the LOL, because that wasn't carelessness in the moment. That was her genuine relationship to the whole thing. It was nothing to her. Patricia's car, Patricia's deductible, the whole situation. Nothing. You can learn a lot about a person in the moments when they think nothing is watching and nothing matters. Turns out those are the truest moments there are. If you stuck around till the end of this one, you're clearly someone who appreciates a good "the text message was evidence" moment. So you might as well hit subscribe, because I've got more of these and they only get wilder from here.